Howdy everybody, my name is Toast and welcome to another video of mine. So for today's video, we're going to be redrawing a very old illustration of mine. I would say this is my first digital piece, if not one of my very first. I was looking at all of my old artwork and looking at the timestamps and stuff, and as far as I'm concerned, according to the dates, this is the first digital art piece that I ever did. However, I am not 100% certain that it is, because I feel like I have a vivid memory of what my first art piece was, and it was some MLP fan art, so I'm not 100% certain. But we're gonna be drawing this today. I opted to do this instead of My Little Pony one because I don't really draw ponies anymore. It was like one of the things I was huge into in high school. Love My Little Pony. I tried rewatching it recently, sobbed my eyes out in the first episode, couldn't continue because I love it so much. So we're doing the humanoid one today, but maybe in a future video I'll revisit ponies and learn how to draw them again. I think that would be really fun. But for today's video, we're focusing on this character right here, and she is, I don't know if you can tell, a Steven Universe character. Not like an actual character from the show, but she is a Steven Universe OC of mine that I don't remember anything about. I had so many Steven Universe OCs. I had an entire AU going on in back in the day. And this was one of the characters that I did. Her name is Peach Barrel, I believe, and I know she's a mix of Tiger's Eye and one other thing. I don't know what the other gemstone is, so pardon me for that. But I do know for a fact that obviously she's a tiger's eye. It's in her eye. I feel like that's pretty obvious. So saying that this is my first digital piece, I don't know if this is like kind of cheaty. It's kind of my first digital piece, but this is back in the day when I still did a mixture of traditional and digital artwork. I kind of only exclusively do digital artwork now, though I would love to get back into traditional art, and maybe in the future I can do some videos about me exploring that and stuff. But this piece of art I created originally, traditionally, and I believe I have a sketch of it up that I can show you guys. And then I took it and I scanned it in, or took a photo of it, and traced it over digitally. Which is probably why it looks so good compared to some of my other digital artwork. Maybe in the future we can do a digital art sketchbook from back in the day. I think that would be a lot of fun to show you all my really bad artwork. But for today's sake, we're just focusing on this piece, and we're going to focus on redesigning this character and redrawing her. So, I mean, without further ado and without further rambling, why don't we just go ahead and get right into the process? Alright, let us hop right on in to the design itself. I knew that first thing I wanted to do is I couldn't just redraw this piece. I needed to redesign the character, because this is a Steven Universe OC, and as much as I adore Steven Universe from, a nostalgic perspective, I have no need for a Steven Universe OC. And if I did, I have a million others I would rather choose instead of her. Which is a little rude, but So, in this redesign, I wanted to make her a little more fantastical, more what I draw nowadays, which is more related to Dungeons & Dragons, fantasy worlds, all of that stuff. I knew that, and I knew that, in the design, I wanted to keep, certain things that were relevant to the old design, like her having 4 arms. Is she a fusion anymore? No, but, she can be a 4-eyed monster, and you can see me here adding ears, and that is because the primary gemstone that I remember about this character is that she's a tiger's eye, and so I thought, oh, I'm gonna make her a furry. I'm gonna make her a cat lady, a tiger lady, a Khajiit, a tabaxi, if you will. She just has 4 arms for some reason, but that's irrelevant. I think that's a little unimportant, why she has 4 arms. So doing this design, I wanted to keep, some aspects of her similar. I also, when I was looking at her, I noticed this front part with the heart and then the tie coming out, and that really reminded me of a tail, which is another reason why I decided to make her a cat person, because I was like, well, that's similar, right? I don't think so at all. Going into her outfit, I was looking at a lot of these European outfits, dresses, if you will. They were very, I can't remember exactly what culture they were inspired from. I think it might have been Romani or Turkish or Persian, one of them. Or maybe a mixture of all 3, to be honest with you. A mixture of that sort of style from Europe is what I was going with for her, because I had originally thought about maybe doing something from Southeast Asia, South Asia, I don't know, India, okay? I was thinking about doing something from India, because, tigers are from there, and I was looking at all the clothing, and I thought it was nice, but I just didn't think it was what I wanted for this character specifically. So I ended up looking at more of that Europe style of clothing, and I imagine that she is a dancer, so you'll see that when we get, I think you'll understand what I mean when I say she's a dancer when we get further into the outfit here. I knew I wanted her to be covered in jewelry, because that's something that I absolutely adore in designs, is I love characters that are covered in jewelry. I think it's a lot of fun. And God, her pants gave me so much struggle, because I couldn't determine, do I want her in pants? Do I want her in a skirt? I had really nothing to go off of in the original design. I was trying to keep it like this two-piece vibe, you know, I was trying to evoke some of the original design, while also completely changing it to be different and better. So you'll see me struggle and change with this bottom part a whole lot. I also gave her these puffy sleeves that you'll see me change later to alternate between the arms, so the arms are a little asymmetrical, because I thought that would be more interesting and more fun. You can see me doing it here, adding in more bangles, all of this kind of fun stuff, adding in, you know, some cleavage window there, because that is a necessity, you know? I love women, and I'm sure you also love women, so, you know what I'm saying. I hated pants for her. I was like, I don't ever draw my characters in skirts, right? But for her, I was like, I have to, because the pants are so ugly. I don't want this. I want her to be in a skirt. And so that's what I ended up giving her. This top portion of the bottoms right now is what I actually ended up staying with. I gave her these, I don't really know. It's like maybe another skirt that's like hiked up or pulled up on top with these, and you'll see later, they're like metal golden pieces that are like holding it up. I'm not sure. It was just, it's a bunch of fabric that's laid over top of each other, you know? I am not a fashion major, so I have no idea what any of this is called. I'm actually a comic book major. Actually, that's a lie, I graduated. I have a degree in comic books. Fun fact. For her hair, I wanted to keep her hair very similar to how it was, however, I couldn't keep the Karen cut. You know, the Karen cut, I don't know if I can keep that on, like, any character, actually. But I still wanted her hair to be short, so I made it a little fluffy, a little cuter, give her bangs that I thought were cute, and because I had this idea of her being a dancer, I did want to incorporate some little bits of long hair, so that when she's dancing, it, like, flows in the wind. So I gave her, is it called the jellyfish hairstyle? I think so. I gave her that kind of vibe, and here, you know, I'm cleaning up the rest of the sketch, making sure it's all legible to read and stuff, giving her her face. I did decide to keep her with the 3 eyes, so she's a very strange tabaxi creature here, because why does she have 3 eyes and 4 arms? Who knows? I don't know. And then I went in with the coloring, and I decided, I was originally starting off with picking colors straight from the character, and then I was like, she's supposed to be a cat lady. Why is she flesh colored? I didn't like it. So I changed her color, and as you can see here, she's still flesh colored, just a different flesh color. So I had to really go in, and it's really hard to pick an orange that looks like fur and less like flesh. So that was a little difficult. But you'll see, these colors all get changed later anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Give her some brighter orange hair, give her these bright yellowish eyes, and I decided to actually keep one of her eyes as the gemstone. I imagine that she probably has a prosthesis, so that eye doesn't work. But you know what, it's fine. She's probably got... Do we think that 3-eyed creatures have better depth perception than us with 2 eyes? I feel like they do. So she probably just has the same amount of depth perception that me and you do. Going in, I decided to give her, obviously, the tigery patterns of, like, the white underneath of the fur, and then I also go in and add in her stripes later. I'm not sure. Am I doing that right now? Yes, I am. I'm adding in her stripes, which is a nightmare to draw consistently over and over again, which is why I don't try to draw it consistently over and over again. I just randomly draw stripes and hope that no one notices, which I highly doubt anyone will. But yeah, I mean, just going through and adding stripes right now. And here you can see that I'm actually going in and changing her colors, because I was like, why am I making her naturally orange tiger? She already has 4 arms and 3 eyes, and she's a fantasy character in a fantasy world. I can make her a pink tiger, and so I did. I decided to make her a pink tiger for fun. Going in for the colors of her outfit, I had the hardest time struggling. I am not good at colors. That's like one of the things I would say I'm the worst at, is picking colors. I'm not good at it. But in the end, I actually do end up with colors that I like. It's just always such a struggle for me in the beginning. So I ended up going with this purple color for her. I thought that that fit well with the pinkiness of her fur. And I thought that, obviously, purple and gold go together so well. It's beautiful, it's regal looking, and I think she's giving that. She's kind of giving princess vibes, which I really like. I really got to figure out a way to incorporate her into my, like, campaign, my world in some way, and maybe, you know, there are fantastical, well, I guess it would be 6-legged, because I'm thinking about an actual tiger right now, but maybe there's, like, fantastical 6-legged, 3-eyed pink tigers in the Feywild or something in my world. And maybe she's just a Feywild tabaxi. Who knows? But just going in, adding in some patterns, deciding on what colors I wanted to make her like jewelry that's the like gemstones and stuff that weren't the pink color. So I ended up making them like a pale white color. And I mean, for the design, that's basically it for her. So all that's left to do is to actually get into drawing the illustration itself. Alright, so hopping into the actual illustration itself, obviously we gotta start off with the sketch, and I knew immediately what I wanted to do for the pose, because it came to me in a vision as I was trying to sleep. I was laying in my bed, and I was just like, oh my god, this is it. This is what I'm doing. And so, it is what I have done. Decided to have her pose. She's like leaning forward a little bit. Not an easy pose to draw, by the way. I always find these ones the most difficult. Like, foreshortening is already hard, but I feel like foreshortening with a character that has boobs and like it's a hard time, I think, based around, you know, a bunch of factors and stuff. You know, I think we get there in the end. I think the pose looks pretty decent. Obviously there's always a few things that you want to change after looking at your artwork, you know, things that you could have done better, but that's why you take it into the next illustration. You don't fix one illustration until it's perfect, you know. Look, quality over quantity, except when quantity gets you better quality. You know what I'm saying? That, I'm sure that made zero sense, but you know, makes sense to me. Going in here with her arms, this is always the hardest part for me. Why did I decide to make a character or draw a character with 4 arms when arms are like my least favorite thing to draw? I don't know. I have such a hard time drawing arms. I find them very difficult to do. I don't know what it is, but I think we get a decent point here at the end. So I wanted one of her hands to be on her hip, and then her other hand is like pushed up and is like pushing her hair back. That's what I was imagining. And then we have her other hand here resting on her thigh. Now, this is one of the things that I really dislike about this piece, I would say. It's like probably my least favorite part is that her arms, the length of them doesn't really necessarily make any sense. And I think it's just something I have to work on with 4-armed characters, is figuring out how long the bottom arms need to go and where they come from. Right? Do they come from underneath the armpit? Do they come from the back shoulders? I haven't figured that out yet. So, you know, it's all an experiment, it's trial and error. And then I knew that for her 4th hand, I wanted her to sort of be like beckoning, you know, to come towards her. I wanted her to be very sexy, I guess, was what I was intending to do for her. She's a pretty lady, you know. Now, and I'm sure you can see here that I have redesigned this entire character, and I'm also putting her in a pose that is nowhere near similar to her original illustration. I think maybe for some people that's a little less like redrawing, and it's just like you just drew an entire new image, actually. But it was very heavily inspired by the original image. I just wanted to use the new skills that I have today. That's all. I could have just redrawn the original character, and I'm sure they would have turned out, you know, way better, obviously. But I wanted to show off everything that I did in terms of the fact that I have improved in character design, the fact that I've improved in posing, I have maybe improved in coloring, choosing colors, I should say. I've improved in my background work. You'll see later that I throw a background onto this piece because I thought, you know, that would be fun. So it's just, you know, I wanted to show that I've improved in every single area and not just like, oh, my art got better. You know, like obviously it got better. It's been like 9 years or something, which is crazy. So I wanted to show that I'd improved in multiple facets of my artwork. So that's the reason that I decided to make it completely different than the original piece, than, you know, most redraws would. And I hope that's alright with you. I will say, I do think, and this is something that I definitely need to work on, which is consistency within bodies. I definitely think that the sketch that I did of her is, when I was designing the characters, a lot skinnier than this version. I think I made her a little bit thicker in the thighs and the biddy region, which was not necessarily my intention, but you know, it is what it is. The more you draw a character, the easier it is to draw them consistently, so if I draw this character more, maybe I will come to a consistent body shape for her. But for now, this is what we've got. And you can see me here struggling with this arm because I was like, I don't know what to do with it. So I just left it as it is, hid it behind the other arm. I kind of wish I changed the angle of it a little bit, but I didn't know if that would work with the pose, so I just left it, and some mistakes are left to be mistakes, and that's fine. Here I'm going in, and we're adding in the top details on top of the body. So we're going in and adding basically everything that we just designed on top of her. I don't know how well it comes across, because when I was imagining her pushing her hair back, I was like, oh, it's going behind her ear, and then I was like, wait, she doesn't have ears. I mean, she does have ears, but they're cat ears, not like human ears. So I hope that this comes across as her like pushing her hair back out of her face. And I decided to have one strand coming out the front and the other strand is behind her because I didn't want it to block out more of the view of her outfit. And we're going in here, and for the sketch, I'm pretty lazy when it comes to details. I kind of just like, I'm like, yeah, I'll figure it out when I get to line art. Which, you know, for some people, they work similar to me, and for other people, they're like, no, they have to sketch out every single detail in the sketch, and that's fine. But I'm a very quick artist, I would say. This piece took me 4 hours, something like that, which for some people, it probably would have taken them more like 7, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, I'm just like, what is the quickest method I can get done with something? And if it is just omitting details in the sketch and figuring it out in the line art, that's fine with me. Which I already knew exactly how I was going to do in the line art, so it wasn't too daunting for me. The sketch is pretty much very simple though. It's just applying the details that we did in the design onto the pose we did. The pose was mainly a lot of the heavy lifting for this portion itself, as well as doing in the background, which we will be getting to very soon. Going in and working on her face, I wasn't sure, and this is probably one of my toxic art traits, is leaving the face for last. I feel like a lot of people draw the face first, and for me, I'm like, no, I'm gonna draw it last actually, because I'm gonna ruin it if I draw the face. I feel like I'm really good at drawing bodies, but faces are definitely one of the areas I need to work at most. But I think that this turned out decently well, actually. You know, she's giving you that beckoning look, like she's like, yeah, come on over here, baby. That's not what she sounds like. I'm gonna make her sound like that when I play her in a D&D campaign. That'd be really funny. Come on over here. And then of course we use the liquify tool to go in and make any adjustments or whatever, because we have the liquify tool at our disposal, so why not? Might as well get some use out of the tools we have at our fingertips. Now, going in for her background, I knew that I wanted it to be fairly simple. I didn't want anything too crazy to take away from the actual character itself, and I wanted the background to be more of like a frame, I would say, for the character itself. There's a lot of beautiful artwork that I've been taking inspiration from recently for backgrounds, because I don't really draw backgrounds very often when I draw characters and illustrations, and I really want to get into it more because I think it really adds such a interest to the piece. It makes them feel grounded, like they're in a specific place, and it gives you an idea of maybe where the character lives and stuff like that. So I have this sort of archway behind her with this like big black, entirely like blackout area that really like frames her character and makes her pop. And then I also have a big potted plant onto the side just for some interest. And I mean, that's pretty much it for the sketch of the piece. And so I guess we're going to be hopping into line art really, really soon. For the line art portion of this drawing, I decided to super speed through it for the video, since it's basically just me tracing over the sketch. Not super interesting, but there are a few things that I want to mention during this portion, so I'm not going to cut it out and skip it entirely. So as you can see, I'm going in here and adding in all of the extra details, giving things like a 3D aspect to them, whereas in the sketch I kind of just draw it really flat, making the bangles look like they are actually jewelry that she's wearing and not just like striped design on her outfit, giving her trim along the edges of her clothing. And as you can see, one of the ways that I forego, you know, drawing tiny details in the sketch and just immediately do it in the line art, I'll tell you, is by doing you create a new layer, and then you go up to the layer properties, and this isn't Clip Studio Paint, I'm sure you can do it in other programs too though, but going up to the layer properties and making the layer have an edge. There's like a watercolor edge, but then there's also a hard edge, and that's what I use. And then you simply make that the edge color is black. You can assign it a thickness. You can also change the thickness later on. And I just go and select the color white and draw with white these large areas, and then they'll have an edge around them. And I do that for mainly jewelry areas because I'm like, this is small and I want the lines to be pretty consistent, but I don't want to have to draw 2 lines that are like the perfect arc. That's really annoying. So I do this method for basically any details, any jewelry, any gemstones, anything like that on my illustrations. And that is pretty much all I have to say about the line art, so we'll just speed through this and get onto the coloring. Moving on from line art, we're going to start on our coloring. And first thing that you should note is if you use the method that I do for line art, where you do the outlined edges, what you're going to want to do is have all of your line art be in a single folder, and you're going to want to turn that folder onto multiply so that the white appears clear, I guess you could say, so that your colors will show up through underneath the layers. Now, hopping in, she's obviously the central focus, and so she is going to have the brightest colors, she's going to pop the most, but we still want the background to have colors that harmonize with her and make her stand out. So we have, like I said, this like pitch black background that is obviously going to make any color that I put on her stand out, aside from black, I suppose, and then maybe don't do that. But for this portion, it's mainly just going in and filling in the flats. The background of the image, I decided to have these like archway, the pillars, be these creamy colors. I imagine it's made out of stone or quartz, something like that. She seems to be in like a regal palace building. I mean, maybe it's not regal, maybe it's just in a part of the world that's not America, and so it looks nice. You know, she has these green leaves behind her, and the green kind of came out of left field, right? Nothing else on her is green. And so I believe, end up changing it later to not be green and to harmonize more, although I actually don't mind the way that the green looks. I think it's a nice pop of color in the edge, but if she's the main character, maybe you don't want the pop of color to be in the background. Who knows? It depends on what your illustration is for and what you're doing. When I do colors, I'm going to tell you this right now. Okay, this is going to make your life so much easier. Do all of your patterns, and especially if you have like a lot of patterns like I do your patterning on a separate layer than you do your flats on. So on the flat layer, I have all of her like skin, her fur, is that like pinky peachy color, okay? And then I have on a separate layer the underbelly color, that white fur part. I have that on a different separate layer, and I'll tell you why later when we get into doing the shadows, the lighting. The same thing with these stripes, they're on a separate layer. This is going to make your life a million times easier. Another pro tip is that for the layers where you're coloring in all of those tiny details, because that can get a little annoying, what I would do is go to the layer, your line art layer, where you have this like edge thing, and then use your magic wand and have it selected to where it selects everything on that layer. So like it doesn't have to be connecting, the pixels don't have to be connecting, and it just selects every single one of like that color on that layer, because when you do that, it will select every white portion that you did, which makes it really easy to fill in those colors. Makes my life a million times easier. As you can see here, we changed the leaves to be a more pink color, and I go in and add a couple gradients to the leaves themselves to give them some interest. Gradients are a great way to add interest to your images, especially if you're only doing flat colors. I still haven't determined whether or not I prefer the look of flat colors or if I prefer the look of shaded. I think they both have their own charm, and I'm trying to figure out which one looks best for my artwork. So maybe you can tell me if you preferred the flat version of this or you prefer the fully rendered shaded version. Now hopping into the rendering and shading, the way that I do it personally is this was going to need like a full explanation, because the way I'm going to explain is probably going to be very confusing, but I'll do it anyway. What you're going to do is you're going to want to create a new layer on top of your color, or a new folder on top of your colors folder, your flats. You're going to create a layer that is entirely white, and you're going to put that on multiply. And then you're going to create a new layer on top of that that has a gradient. What are they called? You're going to create a gradient layer on top of it. I cannot think of the name of it for the life of me, but a gradient layer on top of it. And you're going to set that gradient layer to clip only onto the white layer below it. And for this gradient layer, you can choose whatever gradient selection you want. I have a bunch of them that I cycle between. It's hard to explain, but you're just going to want a dark color, a medium tone color, maybe you'll want some of that like refraction of light on the skin where it's like a little bit brighter next to the shadows. Like I said, I'm not a teacher, I'm doing a very bad job of explaining this. But after you have your gradient layer on top, what you're going to do is you're going to go back to the white layer, and you're going to take your brush of choice, an airbrush, a watercolor brush, whatever brush you want, and you're going to sort of paint in the shadows using black, pure black, okay? They don't tell you, they tell you not to shade with black, but this is the easiest way to do it, because all you have to do is mind your pressure, So for the darker areas, you go harder, and if you want something to be a lighter shadow, you just do lighter pressure, and it basically does all of the hard work for you, and it makes my life so much easier. And I think one of the other great things about doing this in this way is that with the gradient layers above, you can go through and change the different gradients on the different materials that you have, and that sort of creates a different texture vibe for them. Later on, I do change the dress texture to be a little more silky, and all I had to do was change the gradient that I was using for the shadows. It's amazing. It's great. Now, when I said earlier about your patterns being on a separate layer, the reason I said that is that patterns don't affect the way that something is shaded, because it's a flat pattern on something. And so now you can easily go back down to your flat layer and just use your magic wand that selects the single color and select every single version of that color. Now, with this method of doing the shadows, you don't have to do any selection actually, and you can just go in and shade the entire piece without having anything separated. However, just for my own personal sake, I prefer working in small sections. It makes the task seem less daunting, and also using the magic wand means that I don't accidentally get a shadow where I didn't want it. And that's, pretty much it for the shadows. You just go in, you do this gradient layer, and then if you want darker shadows, what you do is you create a second layer of white and gradient. You add in darker shadows, and then I go in and I add highlights separately. I don't just use like the local light, you could say, as the highlights. I do go in and add brighter colors to certain areas, because I think that makes it look nicer. It adds more depth to it that wasn't there previously. So there is still some, things you have to go in and add yourself, aside from just using this all in one method. But I think it looks pretty okay. I definitely think there are still areas that I can improve upon when it comes to, light sources, figuring out where all of that is at. But, I've only been experimenting with this method for a little while, so I think it looks pretty good for the amount of experimenting that I've done with it. I also added some sparklies to her jewelry, because who doesn't love sparkles? And, that is, I think, pretty much it, aside from adding in highlights, adding in, extra details, trying to figure out if I want the plants to be green or not. I couldn't decide. I ended up making them a lighter pink. Just a lot of experimenting goes into colors. That's pretty much it for me. For what I do is I just experiment with colors. And then I go in final and add in some gradients on top of that. So some darkers at the bottom and some bright gradient at the top for light, going in, adding some sun rays, and just adding in a whole bunch of fun final details that make the piece look finished. And then we add in my watermark and we're done. All right, we have completely finished the artwork, the redraw. Tell me what you think. Do you prefer the original? Do you please don't you don't prefer the original, do you? That would really suck. That would be really sad. Don't do that to me. Don't. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy the artwork. I hope you enjoy my reasonings for things. I don't know why I hope you enjoy that. That's just, I don't know. I like when people enjoy my reasonings. It's the autism. Who knows? Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. If you could, I would absolutely greatly appreciate it if you could perhaps subscribe, like, comment, if that is within your power. And if you wish to do so, I would absolutely appreciate it so much. It would mean the world to me. You can also follow me over on Blue Sky if you have one of those. I would appreciate that. As well as I have a VGen, which is a commission website, in case you were interested in commissioning me for some artwork of your own. And I would greatly appreciate that as well. But please don't feel any pressure to spend your money on me. You don't have to do that. You just watching this video was enough. So thank you so much, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye!